Order. Thanks, Chris. For the record, I am serving as Treasurer Milligan's proxy for this meeting. So with that, the minutes were sent out in advance of this meeting, but I will give everybody another minute to glance over them. And if you have any corrections or anything like that, please let me know.
Hey, Grant, don't want to interrupt, but it's John Park. I'm on the line. I'm having trouble dialing into the video on the Zoom, so I'm just on the phone for right now, but I'm going to keep trying.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Hearing no corrections, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So move.
All right, I've got a motion to have a second.
I'll make a second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, so we will now turn over to the director's report, and I'll turn it over to Fran.
Thank you, Grant. And for those of you who are on the previous call, you're going to have a little bit of deja vu here. But in conjunction with the open enrollment period that the state recently had, we were able to attend a few benefits fairs for state employees, and one was in September and one was in October. And we did have a lot of foot traffic at these, and it just did a lot to kind of confirm in our minds that while, yes, there are people who know about the 529, they may not know all the nuances, or they may not know what has changed since perhaps they signed up 5 years ago, or that they have the ability to have automatic draft taken out and put in from their payroll. So I'll kind of get into how we're addressing that in just a little bit. Another fair that Chris attended was put on actually for the Arkansas ABLE plan. But of course, anytime we find ourselves in a situation, we like to try to take advantage of meeting new people and making sure they know about both. And this fair put Chris in touch with some folks at Baptist Health System at one of our larger hospitals here. So, and Chris has since had some follow-up conversations with them. So I think we're going to try to at least have a preliminary meeting before the end of this year, and then hopefully kind of get in the door with their HR folks and try to get our messaging for both the 529 and ABLE in front of the appropriate people and eventually to the employees at Baptist Health. So we'll keep you posted on that. Another presentation we made, which was really interesting, some of you from here in Arkansas might recognize some of these restaurants, but the HR director of a hospitality group based in Northwest Arkansas called Rope Swing. They have 8 different bars and restaurants, the most famous of which is called Preacher's Son. But they also have Press Room and Undercroft. So if any of you have been up there, you know what I'm talking about. But they were interested in the information on the 529 and have not dismissed, I'll put it that way, maybe eventually having a matching program. But they're a perfect example of a company that recognizes, especially in the hospitality industry, ways to try to encourage people to stay with them and, help them make better sense out of their finances. So, and outside of COVID, she said they usually have upwards of 300 employees. So it just varies. And with things opening back up and the holidays coming, that will change. And I know some of those are contractors, but anyway, it was just nice to have that connection with them, and we continue to keep that communication going. In terms of outreach, and this kind of gets back to what I said at the top of the report, we've been working on kind of a strategic plan for 2022, or for the first part of 2022, with regard to state agencies. We've identified the HR directors at all of the state agencies and are kind of putting together a punch list of who we want to knock on the door of first. And so after Thanksgiving, we're going to reach out to the HR directors and introduce or reintroduce ourselves and just slowly try to start getting in front of them and the appropriate people. And then maybe eventually even their employees. Maybe we could do a morning where we bring coffee and donuts by and just make ourselves available to answer questions or talk about ABLE and 529 or, whatever it looks like. But we just think we need to have a very grassroots, especially after seeing the people that we saw at those benefits fairs. I just think there'll be a real benefit to doing that. And then we're also identifying about 15 to 20 businesses around the state. There's a publication in our state, which I'm sure a lot of you have in yours too. It's called Arkansas Business. And they put out a list of the top businesses in the state. And so we've kind of been going through and researching some of the businesses that were profiled in that issue and just kind of using that as a starting point, especially businesses where they talk about how vibrant their benefits packages are. Because to me, that signals a company that values that and would be maybe open to hearing what we have to say. So those are all kind of our marching orders for the first part of 22. Then finally on marketing, we're just kind of closing out the year. Our marketing efforts are focusing on the messaging of either opening a 529 account or contributing to one if you already have one. We also sent out an email last week to about 60,000 Arkansans. For those of you who remember the 529 survey that we did about 6 months ago, it's the same group. This was kind of our last big email push to them before we no longer had access to that data. So again, just encouraging them to consider either opening one or contributing to one. And it didn't require a trip to the mall or shipping delays or anything. And then towards the end of the year, that messaging will shift to include some year-end tax benefit messaging. And then finally, in October, we had our the results of our Morningstar review, and we stayed the same. Our 529 ranking didn't go down, didn't go up, but we stayed the same. So Grant kind of talked me off the ledge on that. I think I had a little bit more of a hope that we would, bump up just a little bit, but hopefully with the adoption of some things that we're going to talk about today, as well as continued things that we're doing internally that might help. So, so that's all I have right now. Any questions about marketing or communications?
All right, seeing no questions. The next item on the agenda is the approval of checks and invoices. However, before I have Fran kind of delve into that, I do want to take a moment and do two things. First, give you an update on Central 25 and where we are with that process. And then two, explain a couple of items that you're going to see on the checks and invoices. So with Central 25, we have informally, formally kind of entered into discussions of unwinding and kind of mapping out what that would look like. Right now we are, and John Peace is sitting in on these calls with us. We're at the point of kind of figuring out what balances are still owed to them. And what that final payout might look like and how that might function. I think it's going to be somewhere between 0 and the number that they are saying, which is about $230 some odd thousand. I anticipate we will go nowhere near the number that they are saying we owe. And the reason behind that is our regular monthly, quarterly pay, we pay it on a quarterly basis, but it's monthly accruals. Are comprised of a lot of maintenance and upkeep And then they are saying there's some development costs that are included in that. I'm actually have asked them to go back and distinguish those two numbers so that we can actually see what development costs potentially are still owed. And then we can prevent the ongoing maintenance and operation costs that are associated with just keeping it up and turned on. We can make sure that those get turned off as timely as possible. And again, I don't want to put any false expectations out there around what that timing looks like, what those values, dollar values look like. Just know that we're in the midst of that conversation. Now, having said that, you are going to see two items on the checks and invoices where there were two payments that were made to Central 25. One of those we had delayed until we could get to a point of saying, okay, we agree that we're going to unwind this. So that was due to them because the app was fully functional during that quarter. And we went ahead and paid the quarter that we are currently in to where we had enough time to get to the end of the year to where some final decisions can be made. I am hopeful that we will be able to make final decisions before December the 31st and thus minimizing any additional cost that would be incurred for this year. Later on, and I'm actually going to call an audible here, we will discuss an amended budget, but I would like to hold any action on amending that budget until we get some final numbers from Central 25 to plug into it so that everybody has a complete budget and that we're not kind of going back and amending quarter after quarter to add those costs in. I don't think that's a very transparent process. So we've got what's been paid plugged in there. You'll see the amended numbers and kind of where we're situated at, but we'll pause to take any action on that until later. But at this point, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you all have related specifically to Central 25. Okay, so Fran, I'm going to turn it over to you to go through the checks and invoices.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to put up for approval the list that you should have in front of you, including the payments that Grant referenced from Central 25.
All right, are there any questions on the checks and invoices? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve as presented?
I'll make that motion.
All right, I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. All right.
Aye.
All right, thank you all. And we will go to John Peace now for our budget report.
Yeah, I think you've got a copy of the actual versus the budgeted items. It's for the 4 months ended October the 31st. The income for those 4 months is around $240,000. The expenses are around $260,000, so we're about $19,500 expenses exceeding the income. We're a third of the way through the fiscal year. The $240,000 represents 35% of the budgeted amount, so we're right in line with what it should be. The expenses, on the other hand, because of the Central 25, are 46% of our total annual budget because we did not budget anything for the upkeep of the mobile app. If you take those expenses out, the expenses are around 36% of budget, so that's pretty much in line for the 4 month period. Right now we have, or at the end of October, we had a total of around $159,000 in the two admin accounts. And that's my report.
All right, thank you, John. Do we have any questions for John? All right, seeing no questions, moving right along, we will now turn it over to Dave Ponder with a census.
Yeah, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Very good. All right, so you guys continue to grow assets pretty steadily here. You closed out October 31st with almost 584 million in assets. And I just want to point out the line. If you look at the historical growth year to year, the gap between one year to the next is fairly similar, right? But look at the gap between 2021 so far and 2020. That's pretty dramatic. So congratulations on that growth. Now, certainly some of that is from market activity, but your inflows are positive, and we'll see that in a second. Any questions on that or any comments? Because that's a pretty impressive graph. All right. By the way, let me see if I can blow this up so you can see it better. All right. Okay, so 2021 contributions year to date, we stand at just over 48 million. That is an increase of almost 16% over the same time last year. And I want to point out that every month this year has exceeded the previous year, except for the month of March. The month of March is just a little bit behind. Every other month, you can see we exceeded the previous year. So congratulations on that. Withdrawals, we are surpassing last year on withdrawals. We were 38.6 million in total withdrawals. That compares to 33.79 million same time last year. The good part about this is that almost 91% of the withdrawals are qualified. Are you guys getting any feedback? Yeah, I heard just a little bit. So the money is being spent for what it's meant to be. So when you do the math, you see 2021 net flows of 9.5 million. That's an almost 40% increase over what we saw last year.
Hey, Dave, hold on one second. Will everybody please make sure you mute just so that we can avoid the feedback? Thanks. Okay,
thank you. Ah, that's nice. Funded accounts, well, we stand at 32,654. I mean, this is these gaps are almost exactly the same. The growth is pretty predictable on the number of accounts for the plan. That's I don't think I've ever seen it quite like that in any other plan. So that's amazing. Average funded account size is up to almost $18,000. And you can again see that how big the gap is from this year compared to last year and previous years. Average account balance by beneficiary age, you see that the kids getting ready to go off to college have a much higher balance than the average balance. And then switch over to iShares real quick. As of the end of October, iShares stood at 686.5 million with 15,687 accounts. Average funded account size is 73.76. The drum roll on this is that your trust, the total trust for the two plans, is up to $1.27 billion. So congratulations on that. That's an incredible growth. It wasn't that long ago, it seems like, when we were about $200,000 from across both $200 million from across both plans. 200,000 would be a little light, to say the least. But that's incredible growth. Congratulations on the success that you guys are having. You promise and you gift. As of October 31st, you gift, we have seen over $9 million in contributions. With iShares, we've seen over 3.2 million. Number of Arkansas gift contributions stand at almost 16,000. iShares stands at over 2,900. The average gift amount for the gift plan is almost 600. iShares continues to almost double that at over 1,100. And then on You Promise Rewards, we are now over $2 million in free money being swept into the gift plan. So that's a nice round number. And that is it from my presentation. Any questions on that? I'll stop the share. No? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, those are some exciting numbers to see. So kudos to all involved for making that happen. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to Julia with Vanguard.
I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
I don't know why it's not sharing.
Chris, do you have it on your computer that you can pull it up for?
Yeah, I have it set where multiple participants can share.
I mean, can you do you have her report, and she could just tell you what pages to turn to?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me just a second. Let me get it pulled up.
Yeah, sorry, I can't get it to share for some reason today. Sorry about that.
Okay. I'll go ahead and share it on my screen.
Thanks, Chris. You can go to slide 4 for me, please. So first, I just wanted to share our posture with respect to the glide path methodology and what we're suggesting for 2022. As you know, we test these portfolios and the glide path methodology constantly. It's a continuous iterative effort where we run simulations on potential wealth outcomes as well as probability of downside risk. And of course, we run simulations against all of these things with updated tuition costs for both public, private, in-state and out-of-state tuitions. So based on that, and also based on our forward-looking return forecast, our 10-year return forecast, which remain muted, we still feel that your age-based portfolios are presenting the appropriate risk-return profile, and that they are still a prudent and effective savings vehicle for education savers. So we're not suggesting any new changes or recommendations with respect to the glide path methodology for next year. And then if you want to go to slide 15 for me, Chris. Thanks. Are there any questions on your glide path, the age-based portfolios? All right, just want to talk quickly about the markets. Third quarter saw weak equities across the board. The S&P was down 4.7%. International equities were down as well, with emerging markets specifically feeling pressure from China. China's been imposing restrictions on its economy and its companies. And if everyone is worried about the massive potential defaults of a major real estate conglomerate, Evergrande. So China is weak, and hence emerging was weak as well as developed. From a sector and style perspective, value outperformed growth, and commodities and hard assets, especially energy and real estate, performed very well in the third quarter. And then if you want to go to slide 24 for me, Chris. I just wanted to talk about some of the major themes that everyone's discussing right now with respect to growth for the US economy, inflation, as well as the Fed. So we still expect growth at the end of 2022 to be about 6%. The Fed has taken a more hawkish posture. They've already begun to taper, so they're reducing their balance sheet, and they have signaled that they will raise rates at the end of 2022. We feel that the Fed may be challenged with that goal, given the current spike in inflation. They may have to raise rates a little sooner than that, but we'll obviously monitor that and be vigilant with respect to the Fed's posture. On the inflation front, we were a bit vanguard, a bit conservative initially coming out of COVID with respect to inflation. It is certainly more persistent and pervasive than we had thought. So we see inflation staying above 2.5%, closer to 3% through the end of 2022. And this is due to factors that you're all talking about, labor constraints, supply constraints, and consumer demand. The average middle-income household in the United States, their net worth is up almost 30% coming out of COVID for various reasons. And the consumers continue to spend on services and on goods. However, longer term, we have a more benign perspective on inflation. We don't see this as a long-term inflation spiral like the late 80s, early 90s. We do see inflation leveling out as we move into 2023. And we see this as more of a short-term spike. And then, Chris, if you just want to go to slide 43 for me. I just wanted to review again our long-term return forecast. So for 10-year nominal returns, we're still seeing a muted expectations. And these haven't really changed. We've been pretty consistent around these for the last several quarters. So for US equities, still about 2.4 to 4.4%. International equities, about almost 3% higher than that, 5.2 to 7.2. And on the fixed income side, US and international fixed income are really aligned with each other, 1.4 to 2.4%. So overall combined, again, fairly muted return outlook for 10-year nominal returns. That's it really for the economy and markets. And I just wanted to turn to your performance, if we could. Next couple of slides, Chris, I'm sorry.
Julia, before we switch off to that, can you dive in just a little bit on inflation and tapering and just, I know there's this term transitory and nobody really knows what that means. And, you know, is transitory defined as 5 years or, you know, 6 weeks, and obviously 6 weeks.
Yeah. So,
but I just want to understand what Vanguard sees, since there is no recommended changes to the age-based glide path. What impacts does Vanguard see as specifically related to, you know, the 529 investor and its impact?
Right.
On
So first of all, let me ground everyone again with the purpose of these portfolios. These are, you know, longer term investment vehicles for education saver with a fairly, you know, not a retirement runway, but certainly a longer term perspective with respect to saving for education. So our perspective on inflation is that there are specific drivers going on right now, supply constraints and labor constraints, which we think will persist. That they will mitigate, but will still be around by the end of 2022, but will eventually resolve. I mean, from an employment perspective, we had great numbers at the end of October. Unemployment is down to 4.6%. There are plenty of jobs available, but we have this unique dynamic going on in the labor force right now where people are still retiring and people are leaving jobs to find higher salaries or work from home environments. So workers are being a little more selective. But again, we believe that this is confined to 2022 and maybe bleed into a little bit into 2023. But we don't see this continuing to impact inflation longer term. There certainly will continue to be wage and pressures because employers are competing for employees and they're poaching from competitors for employees. But again, this is not a long-term trend. Same thing with demand. I mean, consumers, as I said, how the average middle-income household is feeling wealthier and they will continue to spend. Some supply constraints are pushing prices higher. But again, we do feel that that's going to mitigate. It'll still be around at the end of 2022, but the only thing we really see prevailing maybe to the end of 2023 is semiconductors. So we do think that all these specific drivers right now will resolve, and that inflation will stay well above the Fed target in the 3% range through 2022. But we do think it will retrace a bit, come under 3%, and that it will finally stabilize as we move out of into 2023 and beyond. There are, you know, Grant, there really are structural things in the economy which we still believe will put a damper on inflation. It's the demographics of the population, an aging population, certainly technology and its impact on productivity. So we see those as the long-term trends and drivers for inflation longer term, which really is what would impact education savers and your constituents who are in these portfolios. The only other thing I would mention is, you know, debt to GDP ratio. That's something that we would watch. And certainly with some of the big numbers that the current administration was throwing around, that's something that we're vigilant on. But it does seem that some of those numbers are coming down a bit. But debt ratios would be something that we would monitor as well. And that would be more of a 5 to 7 year perspective with respect to our return forecasts. But as I said, for your investors in these portfolios, we still feel that the long 10-year nominal returns are pretty muted and they're pretty low. So we think they're good in the glide paths that they have with the asset allocations that we've designed, and that as long as they save and make contributions and save as much as they can, they'll be successful in meeting their outcomes with respect to saving. Obviously, if some of the more structural trends change, or for whatever reason, the immediate drivers we feel become more entrenched and longer term, we would look at that. But as I say, we are constantly evaluating the glide path. We're running simulations all the time. We're with different assumptions on inflation, long-term returns, et cetera. So this is a constant iterative exercise for Vanguard. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just one more word about your specific portfolio performance. I think I can finally say that we decoupled from the huge volatility impact that we had that impacted your portfolios last year, and that the portfolios are now tracking their composite benchmarks very closely, and certainly the underlying funds are tracking really closely. So I don't have any unusual or unexpected performance differentials to point out to you. The portfolios are really performing in line with expectations. So nothing to point out there. And that was those are the Vanguard comments. Are there any other questions? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And now we will go over to John Park, who has been able to dial in via video. And good to see you, John. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Grant. Good to see everybody. As you can see, I am back in the office for the first time in a long time. So that's interesting. I will share my screen. Let's see, here we go. All right. Just a couple of quick comments just to riff off what Julia just presented as well. BlackRock is coming out with their capital market assumptions tomorrow, or updated capital market assumptions. And similar to Vanguard, I think that we're also looking at a temporary increase in inflation. I think that that's pretty much what the consensus is looking at these days. But similar to Vanguard, we're also seeing that as somewhat transitory. As well, with inflation normalizing over the next 5-year span. One good way to think about what's happening right now is that this is more of a restart rather than a recovery. We've never seen the type of cycle that the world's been going through with COVID before, really. When we've had recessions, it's taken quite a long time for us to get back to where we started when the market dipped. And if you look back at the Great Recession, certainly that was true. And the unprecedented stimulus that the government pumped into the economy at that point is really nothing compared to the amount of stimulus that was pumped into the economy during the first 6 months of COVID. It was, roughly the amount of stimulus that was pumped into the U.S. economy during 6 years after the Great Recession was pumped into the economy during 6 months after COVID started. So it's quite different, but in terms of what you're seeing right now, it's much easier to have a demand restart where everybody just starts to feel safer, starts to plan on consuming a little bit more, plans to think about going on vacation, et cetera, going back to restaurants, than it is for the supply side to restart as quickly, right? So that's what you're starting to see. A lot of supply side issues and bottlenecks. So it's going to take a while for that to re-equalize. And as a result, you're seeing this, what the Fed keeps calling transitory inflation, which I think a lot of people think is going to be a little bit longer lasting in nature than the Fed was originally framing it as. But in the long term, we don't see persistently high inflation, in the cards. So again, similar to Vanguard, just as a framing. As far as the iShares 529 plan is concerned, we had one change in staff in that Kelly Androulis came in as our 529 marketing person. So she's quite familiar with 529, was on the marketing team before. So we're excited to have her. Ashley Sadler moved on to a different role within the firm. So we think that that's going to be a pretty seamless transition there. As far as where the plan sits today, Dave went over the numbers, but we're at 686 million as of the end of October. That's a 16% increase since the end of 2020. So you can see those numbers just over the last few years. The rate of increase has been pretty remarkable. And then, similarly in the state of Arkansas alone, the numbers are even more impressive, right? So the plan assets within the state of Arkansas have gone up 25% since the end of last year. Firm 6%. We're hitting a saturation point where most financial advisors in the state of Arkansas are able to access the plan, so we're happy about that. The number of total financial advisors is also increasing still, so it's up 9% year over year. Number of accounts up 13%, and the average account size for Arkansas residents is getting closer to $20,000. So we're excited about that. And on the right column there, the number that really jumps out is Edward Jones. It's amazing. They have 168 advisors within the state, which is really incredible. Edward Jones has just really been a bastion within the college savings space and really focusing on 529 college savings as one of the 5 pillars of deeply serving their clients. We personally have spent a lot of time with Edward Jones, but kudos to them. They just spend a lot of time engaging with clients, talking about the value of college savings. And in Arkansas in particular, it shows, right? That many advisors accessing the plan, really since we launched the broker-dealer share class a few years ago is really incredible. And Raymond James, similarly, they've also been doing a great job. They're now up to 50 advisors. So, a lot of adoption within the state, and we're really excited about that. And that's really about it for me, unless anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you, John. I appreciate it. So the next item on our agenda is a report from John Peace, and this will be kind of the next few things that we have on the agenda are action items. So just kind of giving everybody a heads up there. But John, I'll turn it over to you to discuss our updated rules.
Let me unmute myself here. Yes, we need to amend and restate the rules and regulations for the name change, the statutory name change, and also to we had a paragraph in the rules about the Aspiring Scholars Matching Grant Program, which has been suspended. So we need to take that paragraph out. Otherwise, the rules are pretty much the same. We made a few little just grammatical really changes, and these have been approved by council for a census. So I'd like to present this for approval.
Okay. So at this point, are there any questions from anyone specific to the rules? Has everybody had a chance to kind of review them, or what is the will of the board?
Grant, I'll make a motion to accept the rule changes.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. All right.
Thanks, Grant. We'll take this to the Legislative Council for review.
Okay, thank you. The next thing is an investment policy, and I do want to give thanks to Dave and Census for really taking this on. This is something that we as Treasury staff, 529 staff, have kind of talked with them about for the last couple of years or so. We're just getting to the point when we hit that $1 billion threshold that, we do need to step up some of the checks and balances and some of the operational aspects of our organization. One of that being an investment policy statement that just kind of guides where we go from 100,000-foot view. But I'll turn it over to Dave to kind of walk through that.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we started this conversation probably the day after you took office. It's been a process, and we're very happy with where we are at this point. It's a very broad investment policy. It governs both plans, but gives a lot of flexibility. And you go back to the Morningstar review, and one of the things they talk about there is parent, the oversight of the plan, and the investment policy, establishing the investment policy indicates stronger oversight, and that's why one of the driving reasons why we'd like to go ahead and get this in place. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them about the investment policy.
Do we have any questions? I will say, from my perspective, it's pretty standard. I didn't see anything that raised a red flag from my perspective as far as areas they were covering or anything like that. All right, with that, what is the will of the committee?
I will make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Alicia. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so the next thing on the agenda, and I'm going to ask Julia to kind of help chime in on this one. Over the past few meetings, we have discussed this concept of a targeted enrollment portfolio. And it is something that we've kind of studied and reviewed, and the board has had materials presented to it. At this point, it is 529's recommendation, our staff's recommendation, that we actually move forward to transitioning to a targeted enrollment portfolio. This would be more in line with where the industry is going. We are not the first ones to do it, but I personally don't want to be the last ones to do it either. I think if you'll see in some of the materials that was presented to you, essentially what this concept does is just smooth out that glide path, as opposed to when you look at the aged based, where it's very laddered, stair stepping. This is a slide. And I think that that's something from a consumer standpoint, from an investor standpoint, brings some ease to it. There's a lot of ease when investing. I mean, essentially you sit here and go, I've got a 1-year-old, I need the money in 18 years, here we go, I'm setting it for that. Or I've got a 10-year-old and I've got 8 years to go. It provides a lot of just ease in understanding. And that is some of the feedback that we were getting, is to make sure that when it comes to a direct sold plan, that it is very understandable and easy for the investor to navigate and select those options. There would still be the same conservative, moderate, aggressive kind of selections that go around it. And with that, I will pause. Be glad to turn it over to Julia to add any more commentary to it, or open it up to anybody else to ask any specific questions that you may have with it.
Yeah, I just think I would add just a few points, Grant, to what you said. So thanks for leading the description of target enrollment portfolios. So I think two things that distinguish these from your current age-based portfolios are: number one, removing another investor choice. This is a single glide path and a single decision. So the account owner, the prospect, would decide what is the age of my Benny, and then pick the corresponding portfolio that aligns with that. They don't have to decide, am I an aggressive investor? Am I a moderate investor? Am I a conservative investor? And as you know, I think from consumer behavior in general, and certainly investor behavior specifically, decisions like that can become a roadblock. And we found that that's where investors, certainly in our larger retirement space research, but also in the 529 research, this is an area where investors will drop out of the process, and it prevents them from engaging and enrolling. So we want to remove one more decision and one more hurdle for your investors, so that it makes it easier for them to understand, it's more transparent, and it's easier for them to make the decision to enroll. Secondly, with respect to the structure of the glide path, Grant's correct. It is a smooth glide path. Instead of having these large steps, they're much more frequent and smaller asset allocation changes with respect to the glide path. This helps us mitigate some of the market impact in trading and doing these reallocations in the glide path. and it also does further optimize the risk return profile of the glide path. So there are two benefits: a modest investment case benefit, and certainly an investor experience benefit as well.
And thanks for clearing up the misstatement that I made on that one, but thanks, Julia.
No worries, Grant.
Just to make sure I understand. So what we're really talking about, based on the years you've got, Grant, like you were saying, you've got a 10-year-old. So I've got 8 years. So that really drives whether it's conservative, aggressive, growth, the investment strategy. Okay.
Right. You would select a portfolio that aligns with the age of your beneficiary. Okay. And the number of years on that journey from the age of your beneficiary to enrollment will dictate what that asset allocation looks like. So it's one glide path. Everybody's on the same glide path. You just enter at a different point, and your asset allocation is adjusted accordingly until enrollment. Okay,
thank you.
We'll make one additional point. And now that 529 assets can be used for other things besides paying tuition for college, you know, if your intent is to save for tuition at a private school K through 12, you can also choose the date that your child will be attending K through 12. So that is a side benefit to this particular glide path.
That's right. Thanks, Dave. More flexibility with respect to use.
So I guess if there aren't any other questions around the mechanics of it, I do want to kind of jump into the logistics of making this decision. So Julia, kind of talk us through what a transition would look like, kind of the timeline around that, and what that process entails.
I would say in general, and Dave, you can certainly speak up. It's about a 4 to 6 month timeline. And the first thing we do once you should decide to adopt target enrollment portfolios is to ask a census when they can schedule it. They need to decide where their capacity is and where in their project pipeline they can schedule your conversion. So we would defer to a census for that. And then once we know when you are actually going to convert, Vanguard would identify and confirm with our investment strategy group the asset allocation that would exist at that point in time in that quarter when your plan would be converting. And then we would work with you using those asset allocations to decide your mapping and how you would want to map your age-based constituents into the target enrollment portfolios. While this is going on, obviously, once we have a date from a census, and Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, at some point we would actually start assign project teams, the Vanguard and the census size, as well as the state, and commence project meetings. We would eventually end up having weekly project meetings once the conversion project starts. So that's kind of what it would look like. But the first big decisions are scheduling with the census, and then identifying what the asset allocations would be for that point in time when you convert, and then working with you, the state, to decide your mapping decisions, and then commencing the project.
And it is not from a legal. This is a big project, not only from a tech perspective, but legally we will need to be in front of this with soft-money, because this is a big change for the investor, going from the current age-based allocations to the target date. That's a big deal. It will be a fairly extensive supplement that people will have to be very careful in explaining how those changes of the assets that they currently hold will be at the end of that project.
That's right, Dave. And Vanguard, we can certainly share with you some of the sample communication timelines that we've used with other states, and some samples of 30-day brochures, which is a requirement which you will have to send 30 days prior to the conversion, with explanations how we explain to constituents what this means and how it works and what their decision parameters are.
So Julie and Dave, both of y'all, what would be the anticipated experience that an existing account owner would go through? And what disruptions, or would there be any disruptions that they might experience that we would need to be prepared for?
Yeah, and Joe, you might want to address this. You would be the first, but I haven't had a plan to do it yet. So I haven't experienced that.
Right. So I think what you have to make sure you explain to constituents is that that this is a fairly simple transition, and that what they have to decide is, do they want to be in a target enrollment portfolio, and if they do, where they would land based on your mapping decisions, and that they would have 2 exchanges, obviously post that, to make changes if they felt. They could glide up and down the glide path and select the portfolio that they felt was more appropriate if, based on your mapping, they landed in a portfolio that they weren't happy with. I will also share with you that the 2 states that we've had the Vanguard plan last year, and Pennsylvania in the middle of last year, we saw very little, almost insignificant exchange activity post-conversion. So based on the communications that you give to your constituents, I think most constituents understand what the change is, and most constituents have been content with where they've landed. We had very little movement post-conversion from both plans. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. Any other questions?
And just for my clarification, from a communication standpoint, Julia, you all help, and I guess would help Dave and us craft, like who initiates that communication with the
state would initiate the communication, but we would certainly work with you, share examples of 30-day brochures, and we would, all of us, the Census, Vanguard, and the state would comment and review any changes to the supplements that are required.
Sure.
Okay.
And Census is the program manager, so I mean we would be spearheading the
okay
application process.
Yeah, Census is the project manager, and they'll be running the project.
Right. But we would all work together as a team with. Okay.
Sure. I mean, oftentimes the supplement is the main communication, but in cases like this, since it's such a different project, we probably want to put additional communication in front of the accountant as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you will send a 30-day brochure to give them 30-day notice.
Okay.
And I can send you some examples of that now, Fran, if you'd like to see.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, what is the pleasure of the committee?
So Grant, just to be clear, what exactly are you asking for today?
So today would be to get approval to transition from the age-based glide path to the targeted enrollment glide path. So that this would be the vote that starts the process of us planning out the transition and that 6-month process.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make that motion.
All right, do I have a second?
Yes, I did have one question. Fran, and I will second, but then can I ask a question?
Yes, because then I would take the second and then we can open it up for discussion. So yeah, okay. That's fine.
So Fran, is this something that would dramatically change like the marketing pieces that you're going to use in the like next fiscal year?
I don't feel qualified. I mean, yeah, I mean, I haven't thought, to be honest. I mean, that would.
It feels like a room change, not necessarily a forward-facing change. Is that accurate?
So all the collateral does reflect the glide path that you currently have. So all the collateral will have to be updated. There will be substantial changes in everything, that from the website to all the printed materials that you have. So all of that will be changed, and of course we're just rolling out changes in the website now that will launch in January. So then we'll have to come back and revisit those changes when this project goes live.
But when you say substantial, I mean, it's not it's not a like an overhaul. I mean, we would just be changing out certain sections of the website.
Okay. Yeah, not new materials, but just changing existing content.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was my question.
Okay, any other discussion points on the motion? All right, I would just, and just for the sake of full disclosure and getting it out there, I will give you my word that we are going to take this very deliberate and very purposeful. We're not going to rush this. There's no need to try to expedite this for any reason. And we will make sure that we regularly update you all on the board as to how this process is going and kind of what phases that we're in. I will make sure that once we kind of get some of the timelines and some of the back end outline figured out, we will get that information out to you all, just so that our principals understand what's going on and are kind of brought back into the loop on this. So with that, I do have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate that. It is an exciting thing, just from a program standpoint. We're always going to try to push the envelope on that new edge and new methodologies that are out there. So with that, any other new business items? So,
yeah, do you want to talk about the budget?
Yeah, we can bring up the budget, and I will. Chris, do you have that on your screen? So here's going to be the amended budget at this point. And you will see that mobile app has been not added in at this point. So yeah, Chris, I need you to go back in and add those two payments, please.
Yeah, give me just a quick second, Grant. Sorry.
So essentially with the two payments, that surplus is going to be down around 70 something. If my quick math is working right. So that's where I would like to try to hold any additional payments. That's kind of my anticipation for the rest of the fiscal year. But again, as kind of discussions are ongoing, we'll continue to update that and hopefully have a final amended budget to present to you all within the next we may have to do a special meeting, but within the next quarter, if not pretty close after that. So yeah, you'll see that with those additional expenses added in, we have a surplus still of just shy of $73,000. Keep in mind that that's based off of last year's income. Hopefully with the activity and growth of the plan, our income will kind of increase a little bit along those same lines as well. But just wanted y'all to be able to see that. Again, if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer questions that you have. Okay.
We also needed to talk about the invite education, that there was just a correction from the budget that was approved at the last board meeting. It doesn't affect, it was for those of you, if you remember our college saver, it's broken down between the Student Loan Authority, Arkansas Department of Higher Ed, and then the Treasurer's Office and the 529 office. And I think erroneously the 529 amount had been factored in at 11, but we actually pay 17. So I think it was John, your budget that you presented was correct in showing that, but I just wanted to make sure for transparency that we had it correct and brought it to your attention. Do we need any kind of a formal approval on this grant or anything? Okay.
Not at this time. Like I said, I want to hold it just to make sure any final payments.
So we get, yeah.
Until we understand where we're going with Central 25 and that money, just because I don't want to keep going back and amending it, but we will update and kind of continue to show where the budget is.
And that may have been on me. Chris, I think, had asked if he needed to put it in there, and I, for the sake of not keeping coming back, that was probably on me. The only other new business, if we're ready to move on from that, real quick, and this is probably directed specifically at Dave and maybe John. John, you were kind of highlighting Park. You were highlighting this when you were giving your presentation. at our last board meeting, we approved raising the contribution limit up to 500,000. And Dave, I believe I reached out to you and just said, is there any kind of notification or communication that goes out either to, direct account owners or to the advisors? And it didn't sound like there was anything formal. And I would just like to put it out there that we, at least to those, 400 advisors, especially half of whom seem to be with Edward Jones, can we work up some kind of announcement to these advisors, letting them know that the contribution level, and to a degree, Chris ran some numbers and it looked like a little over 200 of our account owners, or almost 200 account owners, have 300,000 plus. So, to me, there's an audience that would be interested in knowing that we're no longer at 365 or 366, that we've upped it to 5. So could we work on getting some communication directly to the advisors and to our account owners who that could impact?
Yeah, and I just wanted to, we will be sending a supplement out in January to announce the branding. So it'll go out the first week of January for the gift plan. That will include a paragraph about the change in the max contribution. It's on the website now. Thanks, Fran, for bringing that to my attention. And the iShares plan, John is going to be actually mailing a new program description, a completely rewritten program description in the next few weeks. John Peace, you'll get a chance to see that shortly. And that also has in it the new max contribution amount. Okay. But I think doing some sort of communication to those advisors who do work with wealthy clients on the iShares plan would be a great idea.
Is that increase in the max limit, is that in effect right now, or does it go into effect like Jan 1?
It's in effect.
So is it in effect for this whole calendar year?
No, well, so it only, the process, the way it works is, right, there's a platform module that basically rejects any contribution that's over the max contribution. So when that number is lifted from that point forward, we accept contributions that would normally have been rejected. If someone was at $366,000, any contribution that would have taken them over 366 would have been rejected. So we don't go retroactively back and they say, you mailed in a contribution 6 months ago, it was rejected, you can now send it back in. We don't do that. But any contribution now that comes in that exceeds 366,000 in assets, in contributions rather, we accept up to $500,000.
Yeah, I was just curious as to how if it was changed due to legislation. Does the legislation read that it's in effect for this taxable year, or like what is the effective date, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly go back to hit the effective date, but I guess at the end of the day, it's really, contributions aren't being rejected. So that's
okay.
Would the effective date be the date of our last board meeting where it was approved?
No, the effective date would have to be the day the technology went into effect. Okay. And I can just go back, because you might have had people who got rejected. I think they turned it around within about 14 to 21 days. I can go back and look at the date that they actually moved that live, but they moved pretty quick on it.
Okay. So when you all, John, when you send out your program summaries to the advisors, your program descriptions, is there like a summary page or something like a cover page that kind of highlights anything, or what
so the disclosure when it goes out to end investors will just be the full disclosure, but when we share the update with the home offices of the financial advisors, then we will send it out and bring it to their attention. Right. So yeah. Okay. We normally just summarize like key changes and let them know that these are things that you should be paying attention to. Also, it's pretty standard practice for most broker dealers to send us annual due diligence questionnaires, and quite often there's a question there that just says, has the max contribution amount changed? And so it's something that they're looking out for, because most of the time on their side there's a systemic like setting that they have to change every once in a while.
I see. Okay. Okay. Great. Well, so Dave, would I work with you on the account owner messaging, or how would we?
Yeah, absolutely. We can I'm thinking about in the email notification, because a lot of the gift plan account owners receive their program description updates via email. We can include that change in the max contribution in the content, announcing that there's a supplement out there. So I'll come back to you. I think that's something we're going to be working on in the next week or so. So
thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. The only other new item would be setting the next date. I believe that's going to be March the 8th at 10 a.m. Fran, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm.
All right, so please go ahead and pencil that in on your schedule, and obviously we'll have invites and such coming when we get a bit closer to that. Again, thank you all. I know we went a little bit longer this afternoon. I appreciate your attendance and trudging through some of the work. With that, we stand adjourned.
thanks, Grant. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks, Alicia.